Hey, leaders. In this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Lorna and I are joined by Chris Good, principal of Lindsay Thurber High School in Red Deer, Alberta. In this episode, we're going to explore why collaboration is so critical for student and staff success and how Chris went from not thinking collaborative response could be implemented effectively at a high school to seeing it have success in their large high school of over 2,000 students and over 100 teachers. So let's get started.
Leading organizations with intentionality and purpose is complex work, and dedicated leaders work tirelessly each and every day to build impactful cultures of collaboration. But effective collaboration is difficult and messy. The good news is you don't have to do it alone. Join the Jigsaw Learning team for Leading Collaborative Response, sharing insights for leaders committed to establishing, refining, and deepening collaborative response in their organization.
Welcome to episode 38 of Leading Collaborative Response. I'm Lorna Hewson, co-founder and lead learner of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Kurtis Hewson. We are joined by Chris Good, who is principal of Lindsay Thurber High School in Red Deer, and someone who has become a good friend along with his wife, Deanne, who's also a principal in Red Deer Public Schools. So Chris, great to have you join us here this morning.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be here and glad to be part of it and to talk about something that I really like to talk about and something that's had a real positive effect in our school, collaborative response meetings. So
awesome. Okay, well, let's dive first into a little bit of your background as an educator, Chris. What's brought you to this point of principal now at Lindsay Thurber?
Yeah, so I've been a teacher for almost 25 years. I started teaching in Grand Prairie, where I grew up, and with Grand Prairie Catholic, and then I've been in Red Deer Public for almost 20 years. And part of that is mostly as a principal. So I came here and worked as a vice principal at Central Middle School, and then I got my first principal job at Oriole Park Elementary, and then I got to open Barry Wilson Elementary School when it opened, and then in February 2020, I got appointed the principal here at Lindsay Thurber. So it's a jump going from elementary to the high school. And then I don't know if anyone remembers, but March 2020, a few things were happening in the world. So not the best time maybe to transition schools, but I actually ended up the principal here, moved down to central office. So I did both schools in May and June that year. There was no students in the building. And then since September 2020, I've been here full time. So it's just wrapping up my fourth year at Thurber. So I've got sort of some experience working from K to 12, both as a teacher and as an administrator, and the last 15 years or 14 years, sorry, as a principal.
So when you made that move from Barry Wilson to Thurber, what would have been the size jump going from one school to the other as far as student population?
So Barry Wilson is a pretty big school as far as elementary goes. We were about 600 kids my last year there. So, but still, when I came here, I think we were at 1,700 my first year. Yeah. So basically triple. And then since then we've gone to, we're at 2,000 this year, essentially. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about Thurber then. Student population right around 2,000.
Yeah. So Lindsay Thurber, it's a 9 to 12 school. We are one of the biggest schools in Alberta. We're the biggest school in Red Deer and Central Alberta for sure. So we're 9 through 12, 2,000 students. It's a really diverse school. There's a lot of different things happening here. A lot of different programs. So we're the district home for English as additional language learners. So we've got about 400 kids who are EAL. We also have a French immersion program. We have an international baccalaureate program. We have several inclusive education programs running within our school. We have a partnership with Gateway Christian School. So we have they're sort of our partner school, and the students who are in we call it the Gerber program, Gateway and Thurber, they kind of go there half the day and then they're with us half the day. So those kids are part of our school too. So just a lot of different things going on in addition to just, serving students from mostly the north side of Red Deer. Pretty, diverse group just in our main attendance area. And then you add in all the other pieces. It's a big, busy school with a lot going on. So a lot of students that need support and help, and a lot of really great teachers, great staff. So we have one of the things we do here is we have myself, and then we have 4 vice principals. So we have a learning support team model. So we have 4 vice principals, 4 counselors, 4 learning assistance teachers, and then they work as a grade team with a vice principal, counselor, and learning assistance teacher, and then they would move with their grade. So, if the one group is the grade 9 team this year, they'll go be the grade 10 team next year at 11 and 12. So then that way they're sort of run that cohort of students, which is about 400 or 500 per grade. And they would sort of support them and get to know them and build those relationships and work with teachers to kind of help those kids on their path towards graduation. So
now, I remember that when we first began engaging, and I think the first time we had the chance to chat with you and Deanne, it was actually in Australia.
Yeah.
We had to go halfway across the world to meet people that are a half hour away geographically.
Yeah.
And when we have been talking about the collaborative response work, that structure you just named was already existing within the school.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that school support team layer where we're looking at individual students. So I'm interested in sharing with the people that are viewing or listening to this, what kind of drew you towards thinking about the collaborative response work, and specifically the collaborative team meeting element from at the high school perspective?
Yeah. So you're right. We met in Australia when I was still principal at Barry Wilson. And, I really liked what you had to say. I think there too, at my previous school, we did have a learning support team. We had some really good structures in place, I think, to support kids, but there was like a bit of a piece missing. And I really liked the idea of collaborative response, especially at elementary, working in grade teams, giving each other support. Because, although Barry Wilson is smaller than here, as an elementary, we would have like sometimes 4 or 5 teachers per grade. So we did have a pretty big opportunity to collaborate there, right? And it worked really well. When I came here, to be honest, like I was navigating new to high school, and my first thought was, I'm not sure collaborative response would fit. And of course, I was thinking how I did it at my last school, which was mostly by grade level. Right. And here, you've got so many teachers at one grade, and most teachers are teaching multiple grades. I wasn't sure how it would quite fit. So, but when you talked to me about it, you did say there was other schools doing it. So I actually had you come in and speak with my VPs, and who are all experienced high school people, and they really said, no, this actually would fit better at a high school than elementary. They could really see where that piece was missing, right? So that I think that our teachers here, we have really great teachers. They do a great job with those sort of universal level supports in their classroom. And then, with that learning support team structure, that's really been a game changer. It was the previous principal, Dan Lauer, who's now our associate, that brought that structure in. And that was really, I think most teachers and staff would say that was a game changer in terms of really improving our results, really improving our high school completion rate.
Being having that looping grade level team that included vice principal, counselor, and learning assistance teacher as the core of that team.
Yeah, right. So I think that was working. But there was a little bit of an element missing with that, like extra support for teachers. So, you've got those kids that are kind of using the lessons teachers or teaching or the whatever that's going really well. And then you've got kids being referred to the learning support team, which I think there's also some really good supports in place for that. But I think it's that group in the middle that we wanted to give some support and also share some ideas, right? And I think when I got here, Lindsay Thurber is a really high functioning school, and there's lots of great, it's very collaborative in nature anyway. But I think the collaboration tended to more be by department versus, cross department. So I think when we looked at this, we really saw it as an opportunity to have different members from different departments be able to learn from each other and sort of build that sense of community school-wide, that existed, but I think could have been strengthened. So I think that's where we really saw it initially as something that could really help us, right? And so, and I think that's what I think since we've started now, this is our 3rd year, I think that's probably been the biggest thing, the biggest piece of feedback we've got from teachers is that they really enjoy that opportunity to collaborate, strategize, learn things from other departments.
So, Chris, I'm interested, before we get to the logistics of, what does it look like in practice? I want to go back further, because you talked about how we introduced it first at the admin level, But I'd love for you to share how you went through that, how you, as a leadership team, structured the introduction and then implementation, because it was not, hey, we found this thing and let's all do it together. You had to be really strategic with a school your size. Describe what that looked like.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think when we implemented this, it's like I think it was something that we recognized. Even for me, I'm like, I thought of it. It worked so well in elementary. Would it work here? But if we were going to implement this, I really wanted to go slow and get lots of feedback and make sure that when we did implement it, it was done right. And also we had some staff support behind it. So I think our first meeting with you was probably in October or November. And then what we did is we actually got a group of teachers together, and we said, we kind of asked a group, and we had probably like 10 or 15 teachers, I think, from across the school. And said, we're considering this. We wanted to just have a meeting and talk about it, right? So then we brought you in one day, and you did kind of a half day and talked to the teachers about collaborative response, how it works, how it might be structured in a bigger school. And then we went back to those teachers. We had a meeting and said, what do you think? And I think the consensus from that group was that no, this could be something that was really good, that could really help our school. And so we kind of were building our I guess, support for, I think when you want to implement something new in any school, whether it's the smallest school or the biggest school, you want to make sure that you're building that support along the way so that people feel good about whatever it is you're doing or bringing
almost
in.
That critical mass within your team.
Yeah. So then that's what we did. So, we kind of got the admin team on board. I think actually before we went to the teachers, we actually talked to LSTs about it. So like our other teacher leaders, our counselors, our learning support teachers. Then we brought in a group of teachers and talked to them about it. And all along the way, I think there was support for, yes, this could work at our school. This could be something that would be really helpful for us. So, and then at some point, then we rolled that out to the full staff, and the staff was on board with it. And then, so we implemented it the following year. So we took almost like a whole year to kind of look at it, build consensus, and also get feedback on how do we make this work at our school. Because I think one of the great things about CRM is that it, like most things in schools, if you have something that's like, this is the exact way you do it in every single school, it doesn't tend to work, because I think the context of each school is the same, or is so different that I think what I think about, what I like about CRM is it's a structure that there is a research base to it. Like, here's the components that need to be in place, but the way you do that can be different, and really individual schools can use it to kind of meet their needs, right? So I think that's where we had to talk about, here's what we want, and how do we make that work within our context. And I think that's what's so good about about CRM as a system to implement in a school, that yes, there's a research base of evidence-based best practices, but also there's the flexibility to make those components fit within the context of your school, or to structure it in a way that can really work depending on the school, right? So I think even how the groups are made at one school might be very different from another, right? Who's part of each team is different, all of those things. And the other thing I really liked about it initially, and I think is that, for me, like one component of the LQS that doesn't get talked about very much is like that, is LQS number 7, which is, essentially the aspiring leaders, or, building leadership capacity is the official title for it. And I really think that that's something that we need to be thinking about as leaders, is how are we building that capacity within our school? And if we're not doing that, we're kind of not, we're not doing our job. And I think this really, one thing that drew me to CRM is that it really allows us, because we've got all these teams, we've got facilitators, it's allowing us to really sort of build that leadership capacity in the school too.
Distributing that leadership among multiple people.
Yeah. So,
really,
as admin, we don't go to every meeting. We can't. There's too many teams, but we have to have these leaders in every team that are getting experience, like working with people, running a meeting, getting people to speak more about something, sometimes getting people to speak a little less so we can move on to the next person, all of those things.
So that's great, Chris. And you're right, like that context is so important to pay attention to. So we love for you to be able to share. How did you, or do you, structure your teams and structure those layers in your school?
So yeah, so what we did is we looked at, we want to kind of keep the teams to like groups of, sort of 4 or 5 so that we can get the meeting done in a reasonable amount of time. So what we did is we really wanted to have that opportunity to have multiple teachers from multiple departments together. And that's one of the things we've really seen is, I know in my first year, I had, a great science teacher, great English teacher, a math teacher in my team. And the one day the science and the math teacher were kind of talking about an issue for them is with the increase in English language learners that are in their classes, like how do we sort of help them, and the vocabulary is not there. And so the English teacher was like, oh, well, you just do like this vocabulary wall before each unit. I teach all the vocabulary, I pre-teach that, right? Which is something maybe science and math teachers wouldn't traditionally do. So she actually shared with them like how she does it, the way she does it. And all of a sudden you've got the literacy teacher, or the English teacher, sorry, teaching the science and math teachers, helping improve their practice and helping them, give them a really great strategy and a structure that they're probably still using to support all the students. And the reality is it started as like a discussion for how to better support EAL learners, but probably there's a lot of learners in those classes that are really benefiting from those kinds of things, right? So what do the best English teachers in our school or social teachers in our school, how do they do that? And then on the flip side, you'd often have like the math teacher teaching everyone else about like some numeracy skills, which are at play in other courses too, right? And also just the ability, because it's a big building. So I'm thinking even actually just of this math teacher and the English teacher from my first year, it's a long walk from their classes. Like they're not probably honestly, so this gets them together once a month to kind of share, and then you're building, and then the department is sharing ideas. It's like, I learned this from English, and then so I think there's a lot more back and forth between the departments because of that. So
just that cross-pollination that doesn't happen naturally because people may not be passing in the hallway.
No.
Right.
It does happen sometimes, but yeah, you don't even on, we have our PD days, but unless we structure that opportunity into our PD days, when we have a staff meeting or PD, generally people sit with their department, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's not happening. So back to the thing of how we structured it. So I guess our question is how we build the teams, and we really wanted to have like cross-department teams so that there's that cross-curricular learning happening. And then how do we structure it within our day? So when we first started it, we had still, we since changed our timetable, but we had a built-in flex block for 45 minutes a day. So we just did Tuesday and Thursday is when the CRM meetings happened. And we did, and we would do sort of like 3 meetings every Tuesday or Thursday. So then throughout the month, all of the teams would get to, 6 meetings a week times 4. We'd kind of get to all the teams would have the opportunity to meet.
So about how many teams, collaborative team meeting groupings would you have for your
20,
population?
About 20.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And we
have about 100 teachers, so 20 teams of 5 essentially.
Do those teams stay consistent during the year, or do they ever move or flip?
No, they pretty much stay consistent. We flip them at the end of each year.
Yeah. Okay.
So we will adjust them at the end of each year, but for the entire year. Now there might be cases where, we have new teachers come in for second semester, or there has been times where maybe a group it just isn't quite working the way we want it to. So we've made some adjustments, but generally, no, we would sort of make those teams, and we try and look at like who might be able to work together. So we have like a group of us that kind of build the teams each year, right?
Right. Okay. So, and so you mentioned that's how you used to timetable. What does it look like now for you, Chris? We'll be right back to continue this episode.
In the spring, we often find ourselves stretched between 2 worlds, with one foot in the year wrapping up and the other foot in the year to come. This messy middle presents many challenges, but also provides opportunities to learn from the past and plan for the future. Join us for the online workshop, Planning for Fall Startup, Re-engaging Collaborative Response, part of our Supporting Collaborative Response series. In this on-demand workshop, I will share 5 ways to reflect on learnings from the current school year and 5 considerations for planning for the new year. I'll also be sharing numerous resources, templates, and samples that will support you in your learning. Access this on-demand workshop and you'll have the ability to view, replay any or all of the workshop when it best fits your time. Register today to learn more about how the fall startup can be an excellent opportunity to re-energize your school's collaborative response efforts.
And now back to our conversation.
Yeah, so we did that the first year where it's like, this is when you're meeting. And then at some point in there, I was at a conference and I really wish I could say like, this is the speaker, but I can't actually remember, but there, or I did a PD or read a book or something about how like one of the things that people like and teachers like is that, and there's research to back it up, is like giving them a choice about like when they meet. So like you might have a block of time, but like you can kind of meet whatever works best for you. Right. And I know for me, like I didn't like actually the flex time because it's usually a pretty busy time in the office. So the second year, what we actually did is, and we actually met with our CRM facilitators, and that was one of the feedbacks we got from them, is that some of them liked the flex time, others would have preferred a different time. Yeah. So the second year, we actually said, well, let's give teachers a choice, like when do you want to meet? And so we gave them the option of you could do it before school time, and after school time. You could still meet during flex and we'll schedule that for your team, or you could do it on our PD Fridays. But with the caveat on the Fridays that I'm not building time into it for teams, like you've got to make that work around, and generally our Fridays will have a staff meeting, some PD department time, teacher time. So your team's got to make it work around that. Yeah. And so that's what we did. And then, or it's some people we asked, like, if it doesn't matter, which was helpful because then we could fill out some of the teams. So yeah. And then we did, generally we had like 3 or 4, probably 3 teams actually that wanted morning, 3 teams in the afternoon, 3 teams, 4 teams on Friday. Most teams did stick with just the flex timetable. So that worked really well. And I think like for me, I ended up in a morning group, not because I really wanted to, but because we were short a facilitator there. Yeah. But that was great for me. I didn't miss one meeting that second year. Whereas the first year I had to have a backup facilitator on my team because I was constantly like, I probably missed a third of the meetings. Right. So the mornings were great for me personally. And I think I had some morning people in my group and it was great. Like I got their coffee order and I showed up with coffee every time. And so for us, that really worked. And I know that, it's kind of like when I get to school, I usually get to school about 7:30 and I leave about 5 every day. There's always teachers here before me. There's always teachers here when I leave, but it's never the same. Some teachers get here early and they leave a little earlier. Some get here later and stay a little later. Right. So, so I think some morning people really loved having that once a month in the morning, and some like the afternoon, and some like just doing it during flex. That was what worked best for them. So I think giving that choice, and then we looked at that and we actually built the teams based on kind of when they wanted to meet, but still we were able to do like the cross curricular from different departments. So
essentially you were saying, you must meet in a collaborative team meeting once a month for approximately 45 minutes, but when it happens is your call.
Yeah. Yeah. But we gave them the choice and we built the teams based on who wanted to meet when, right?
So let's get the morning people
together. Yeah. The after school people. And sometimes they could meet outside of that time. One of the things we ran into right off the bat was scheduling. So we met with our facilitators in like November and said, you got to schedule your meetings for the rest of the year now. Yeah. Otherwise, if you try and kind of like the morning, like that, we still scheduled even the flex ones. We kind of asked when they were going to do it, so that made sure we didn't have like 6 on one day, but it kind of spread out throughout the month. But then we did have like everyone's got a schedule. So mine was like the second Wednesday of the month every month, and I just sent out a calendar invite for the whole year, so it was kind of locked in. Right. And that worked really well for me. And I think my group, and actually that second year, I think our attendance at the meetings was a lot better. There's always people like you're sick or you're away but you're or things happen with kids, you got to test, whatever. But I think by being able to actually have a say in when you meet, I think teachers could have a time that kind of worked for them. And so they were more likely to, we don't track attendance, but my perception was that it was better that year. So.
Okay, so when we think about these layers of team then across your school, we have we talk about the school support layer, and really that's your grade level grouping that's looking at students who are getting referred and needing additional supports. Maybe we need to put a referral forward for learning services within the building or beyond. Then you've got your collaborative team meetings that are that once a month cross department. And then you mentioned that there's then still department time where we're engaging in collaborative planning. What does that look like in the school?
So when we have our, like, one in Red Deer Public, the structure of our calendar is like once a month we have a full Friday for staff learning days, right? And so during that time we'll always have like some department time. So departments may have goals that's more focused on like curriculum though.
Exactly.
Planning, assessment, things like that, versus 100%. Not so much discussions about individual students and
we issues. Always talk about that you need that collaborative planning layer where you're probably not talking about kids, you're talking about things that are going to impact all students through this particular subject discipline.
And it's almost like that's where you're really setting those sort of like tier one, making sure we have really good semester plans, unit plans, daily lesson plans, engaging lessons, active learning, good assessment that's kind of driving our instruction, all of those things that we're looking at, though, almost like on a 10,000 foot level. Whereas I think once you get into like the CRM meetings and the learning support team meetings, that's when you're getting more into like the street level view of kids and issues and what's happening, and different things are happening in different classes, and where teachers need to make adjustments for depending on the class and the students and all of those things to meet their needs, right?
Well, we talk about through those layers of team, the conversation about the student intensifies, and then we might reach a place of, okay, now we need to talk about Kurtis, and let's get the right people around the conversation for that one kid. But through this layering, you should be having less one kid at a time conversations for us overall.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what we see. And, it's interesting because in our groups, we know that kids, especially at this age, like the relationships they have with their teachers are so important. And they have different relationships with different teachers. You could have two great teachers, and some kids, they really gravitate to one and to the other just because of the way it works, right? Or how they like to learn best. And I think even my own kids went through this school, and I think like, my daughter's favorite teachers weren't my son's favorite teachers, and it's just that. So, but it's interesting, even when we bring up like students of concern, sometimes we do like a celebration first and then a student of concern. And I've actually had it happen in my group where, one person has a student of concern and another person has that student as a celebration. And then we're talking about like, oh, well, who has a great relation, so that we're working together on like how we can better support that student. Right. So, but I think for the most part in CRM, we moved on to like, the second year, we also, like the first year, we kind of made it just show up and talk about a kid that's doing, a kid that's doing well, a kid that's, maybe you're worried about, but you wouldn't necessarily be sending to the learning support team. And then our second year, the teachers really wanted some themes, right? So we came up with like, we would have a different theme every month of like, this is kind of what we want to focus. These are the students on. And then at the end of the second year, the teachers were saying, well, can we just say like an issue or bring up like, I've got a group of kids this is happening with. Right? And so we said, sure, just bring in that issue. And then we're more talking about, whether it's attendance or missing assignments or engagement or, lots of different things, motivation. So I think, and so that's where it's kind of evolved into that. And then this year, one of the things we really wanted to focus on, because I think we've also been sort of planned and purposeful in building our system slowly and not adding too much too fast, right? So really, I think the first year, the feedback we got from staff was like, we really like the opportunity to collaborate and meet people from different departments. The second year, it's like, oh, we really liked, learning some of those strategies. But then we thought this year we really needed to start working on like sharing the great strategies and the things that are coming out of these meetings with everyone. So we actually have a teacher now that every month goes in and pulls all of the sort of the strategies and things that are mentioned more than once, or things that are really working, and puts it into like a document. And she does a really great job, like really creative teacher. And so then we give those out at staff meetings, so then teachers actually could have a poster of like, here's some things that we're seeing happening in our school, right? And even we do a theme every month, and then at the end of each semester we do like reflection and celebration of like, you know, what's worked really well this semester. And so, you know, at the end of January she had a top 10 list of things that teachers are really saying is work really well in their classes, right? So there's just like a lot of things that most teachers would do, but just a good reminder too, and sometimes just on the importance of like, this is actually what's happening, right?
Well, and powerful opportunity for reflection.
Huge.
Yeah,
well,
yeah, for sure. Critical. And also celebration, like sometimes I'll send that out and be like, you know, how awesome is this school? I mean, look at all the things that our teachers are doing when they're working with kids. And one thing I think has been good about those too is when we do our PD, sometimes we're on like bigger picture things, like philosophical almost, you know, ideas. Whereas that sometimes it's like just really basic classroom, like making sure you have like a structured lesson plan, and making sure that you're always looking at who's sitting where in the class, right? Making positive phone calls home, making those connections, things that you know, are just simple good advice, things that we got to make sure that you keep doing every day, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Chris, you've got 20 teams, and then you talked quite a bit about the facilitators for those teams.
Yeah.
Would love to know a little bit about, you know, how do you choose that person that's going to facilitate? Do you have training that you do with them, or what does that look like?
I really like the idea too of distributing leadership.
Yeah.
Where, you know, we have formal admin roles, but then we have department heads, and then we also have facilitators. We'll be right back to continue this episode.
This question is brought to you by WeCollab. Designed by educators for educators, this comprehensive digital system aligns with the foundational components of collaborative response. Moving from conversation to action, WeCollab empowers classrooms, schools, and systems to provide the very best response for each and every child by informing action-based decision-making with data and evidence supporting student success.
Now back to our conversation.
So yeah, generally we have like all of the administrators, like myself and my 4 admin are all facilitators. Our LATs, our learning assistance teachers, are all facilitators. Not all of our counselors are, but then we do have some of our curriculum leaders, not that many, but we sort of ask staff for volunteers, and then we'll shoulder tap some people. You know, sometimes you can see there's that teacher that might only be in their like 3rd, 4th, 5th year, but you're like, okay, that person I think has potential for leadership. Yeah. So this is really sort of a low risk opportunity for someone to take on, and the skills that they're learning, right, as a leader. You know, I wish if I could have facilitated meetings like this in my 1st, 2nd, 3rd year, how much better prepared would I have been for that first VP role, right? Or even my first principal role, right? In terms of like managing meetings and managing personalities, and also learning about, like, you know, you think about as a teacher leader, like the opportunity for you. I always say as a principal, when I really well, maybe not became a better teacher, but where I learned more about how to be a good teacher is when I became an admin, and I get to go in and watch other teachers teach, right? And I'm like, oh, I would do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So I think that's really great opportunity for aspiring leaders too, to kind of get a handle on like, what does great teaching really look like, as you hear teachers talk about their the work that they're doing. And also, how do you work with teachers that are struggling or frustrated? You know, how can you reframe that conversation? So I think, all of those are really good opportunities. So in terms of the facilitators, we do have like an aspiring leaders group within our school, and they get to do things like, we give them the option of being an acting admin sometimes, or following the LATs, coming to like a faculty council meeting, which is a meeting of all our curriculum leaders. And then this would be another part of that, right? Like they could be a CRM facilitator, and it's a good opportunity for them. Like I said, when I think about the LQS, right? and you think about all 9 of them, there's sort of like a giant Venn diagram where there's some specific things to that, but then there's also like an overlap with every single one. But I think that number 7, the building leadership capacity, is like a giant circle that goes over top of all the other 8, because you've got to be working on that in all of them. So I think that that's something that is really, you can't forget about, because this CRM really gives you an opportunity to sort of grow those leaders.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. So, Chris, we have a statement for you and we'd love for you to finish it off. So, as a result of collaborative response, we have seen.
I think we've seen real like growth in like the collaboration in our school, and we've been able to build some great relationships amongst our teaching staff. And as a result, we've been able to really help each other better support students.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's so good.
Well, and you talked too about, we're collaborating in departments. Now we're collaborating across departments. And I would think that has to have impact on informal conversations that happen, where now I may not have known that, for instance, this English teacher was really skilled in this development of, like you said, pre-teaching vocabulary, but I don't need a meeting to now go and tap that person when I'm interested. Hey, I've got this one idea. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think that English teacher and the math teacher that I talked about earlier, that math teacher probably starts doing that, and another math teacher in that hallway, which is really far away from English, might be like, hey, how'd you do that? And they're going to say, oh, well, I in my CRM, I talked to this teacher, and they might wander down there and ask them too. Right. So I think that there's where that, there's what happens in the meeting, and then there's also what happens outside of it. One thing too, like, that's interesting for me this year, as I have one of the counselors on my team. And so we have 4 counselors. They're really busy. Their schedules are very full. They probably don't get that many opportunities to interact with all the staff on a regular basis. Right. But, having him in our CRM, his take and perspective on a lot of the issues and the kids we're talking about, it's different. And I think it adds so much to the conversation. And so you think about, for us, we've got 4 counselors that are all part of these conversations once a month. Now, they're not in every group, but, you think about over the course of 3 years, our 4 counselors have been part of 12 different teams, right? Next year, it'll be 16. So it doesn't take long before every teacher has had the opportunity to collaborate with a counselor, 10 times or 8 times in a school year, for an entire year. And I think that there's those kinds of things. Or you think about the greatest teachers you've ever worked with, or the best, those teachers that are just so good in our school, or some of our more experienced teachers that may not be teaching for that much longer, but they're getting the opportunity, like younger teachers are getting the opportunity to learn from them, several times a year, and hear their perspective and their take and how they would approach different situations. So I think there's a lot of power in that too, right?
Yeah. So Chris, we have one last question to be able to pose to you, and it's one we love asking each one of our guests. It's in the spirit of, if you knew then what you know now, what advice would you give your past self in relation to establishing and sustaining highly impactful collaborative practices in a school?
I think that what I would suggest is, like, really that structure of how you meet and what you're going to talk about and how you do it, I think is really what's really powerful. I think, I sort of, we talk about like the digital natives and the digital, what's the other word that immigrants, or where you come in and, you're new to that. And so for me, one of the things that I could look at is, like, you think about that idea of like professional learning communities and collaboration, that was sort of coming into place just as I was starting teaching. So it's always been a part of my career. But what I would say now, that I've learned is, like, the importance of how you structure that time, that it's planned, that it's purposeful, and also starting with something positive, to always share the good things we're doing, right? And not just, because I think early in my career, I think when we would have those types of meetings, or even when I was first a principal, we did have a really good structure in my first school to have sort of weekly collaborative meetings or monthly collaborative meetings. But I think it was often like, let's talk about all the kids we're struggling with, right? And I think, to me, that where we always start our meeting with, like, who's a student that has really made some good progress, and let's focus on what did you do as a teacher to help them, what got implemented, right? And oftentimes that's where the real learning is, right? So I think you start with that and you're like, oh, okay, I could, when a teacher says, here's what I did with this kid, oftentimes most of the other staff is like, I've got about 20 kids that if I do that with could potentially make a difference, right? And then we move into strategizing on ones that we're not sure how to help, and then we go from there. So I think this is a really long answer to your short question.
Oh, no, it's good.
if I knew then what I know now, I think I would just make sure that I would have structured those meetings differently, focused on positive and focused on looking for solutions too. And I think just being always solution focused versus airing of grievances, I guess, is good.
Awesome. Okay, well, that brings us to the end here, Chris. We want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And I'm going to be connecting with you after. If you're willing to share, I think people would love to see what one of those posters that you mentioned, that what an example of that might look like as well, which is fantastic. So we really appreciate you taking the time, sharing this out. And in the show notes, if you're okay, we're going to add your email so that if there are other leaders from large schools, high schools that are looking to connect a little further, that they're able to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. We wish you all the best.
Great seeing you again, Chris.
Yeah, good seeing you guys too.
All right. Take
care.
Yeah.
So when it comes to key learnings from our conversation with Chris, lots to take away there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it was so great visiting with Chris and just having him share what this looks like in a very large high school.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that he talked about was that opportunity to be able to have teachers learning as leaders.
Yeah.
And that there was great opportunity for them to be facilitators, which allows them to engage in the leadership aspects of leading a team. And just being able to, across that whole school, have a number of teachers who are really trying out the leadership piece through the collaborative team meetings.
Well, and you think about too, the opportunity to gain some of those leadership skills through curriculum leads, department heads, collaborative team meeting facilitators. I mean, that's fantastic. And again, causes me to reflect on early on as an administrator, thinking I have to lead every one of these so that everyone else can have that pressure off them. But to flip it to where Chris is, man, it would have been so much more powerful to say, all right, for this one, who now would like to facilitate, because you're building up that skill set for others.
But recognizing that Chris is still part of the leadership of those teams as well. And so is his entire admin team. They all have leadership.
And I think this is one of the keys too, is understanding that each of those layers of team. So we talk about the layers of collaborative structures and processes, and the collaborative planning. We are looking at curriculum, at assessment, at things that are not looking at individual students, but he's got that in his department teams. Then we have our collaborative team meetings that are cross-departmental, that are getting more around key issues we're experiencing for students. And then they've got their next layer of the grade level teams that are looking for students that are getting referred further. Like just the meshing of different collaborative structures, so critical.
I love how he talked about teachers now, the math teachers talking to the English teachers, and not just talking socially, but now they're actually talking about their practice with each other, which is super exciting.
Well, and I also think, and remember when we were engaging initially with Lindsay Thurber, of being really intentional about implementation, and that this wasn't coming from a top down, but rather who's the critical mass that we can establish, and then let our teachers say, yeah, I think this is something that would benefit our practice and the overall work at the school.
Yeah.
So with this, thanks once again to Chris. And as always, like, subscribe, share this with a colleague that you think would benefit, who's also leading perhaps a larger high school and could reflect and benefit from what Chris was sharing. As always, we'll add a discount code for our book into the show notes, and we'll try and add a resource from Chris as well from his school to be able to share out for everybody as well. So with that, we wish you all the best as you continue engaging in the work of leading collaborative response. Take care.
See you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media. Subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.